This is a test. This is me doing a test. The meeting's not starting. This is me doing a test. Zoom, and now it's showing that.
Boy.
Scared everybody.
Did you get these? Henry?
Not yet.
Okay. That one statement and all of a sudden we're a Quaker meeting. What are you talking about?
Just a minute, I just want
No,
to.
please.
Everybody's here.
So,
No, people have to sign it, right?
you could.
They
You want me to
typically
pass it
do.
around?
Yeah. I can circulate it if you want.
Okay.
No, so we got these 5 people here. Christina Dolan. She's with Vermont Center. Christine Gordon. Christine Gordon.
She's
Supervisor, yep, superintendent, supervisor. Helen Edmonds. Robbie Henderland. There's a couple more people watching.
okay.
Put that on.
Yeah, it's right here. Thank you. If you will, sorry. Oh, sure. Thank you.
Greg, you have a pen?
Yes. Steve Cobb, Conservation.
I knew the name, sorry, but I couldn't place it.
Okay. Good evening. Greg Daniels is signing just a sheet that will circulate. Cheyenne Vladimir is usually our note taker. She's not here this evening, so Mary is quickly catching up her old skills. We'll be doing that. Our first order of business is accepting the minutes of August 15th. If I could have a motion to accept those minutes.
I'll make the motion to accept the minutes for August 15th.
I'll second. Thank you. Is there discussion? Clyde, Mandy?
I wasn't at
Okay.
that meeting, unfortunately.
That's right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
So I'm abstaining.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's go on to the warrants or the accounts payable up through today, the 6th of September. If I could have a motion to accept those.
I'll make the motion to accept them.
Thank you, Mandy. And a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Dave, the $2,400 for the GIS support, is CAI the vendor that's supplying that, or I thought, who's our computer support group?
So CAI provides the mapping. Basically, there's a couple of different mappings that we've got, but basically the tax mapping
Okay.
and the mapping that Sean McGranigan has been doing as well is the basis. So CAI is the basis of that, different from CCI,
CTI, that's the one I
our,
was.
our IT support.
Okay, great.
I assume it's a entry thing, because you got gas at Coda and Coda, and then under Evans Fuels, you got diesel, gas, diesel.
Yep.
It's all, you don't buy.
So we get diesel from Evans.
Yeah.
Instead of using Mike's, there's 3 highway guys, well, it used to be 3, 2 highway guys use the pumps over at Coda
Yeah,
for regular gas.
but under Evans, it's coded as gas, not diesel.
Oh, okay.
So it might be
Yeah,
just
thank you.
a coding error.
Yep, I'll make a thing for that. Thank you, Clive.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor of accepting the invoices up to September the 6th? say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Adjustments to the agenda. Were there any adjustments?
For consideration, I know we have the Act 250 hearing coming up on the 19th. Planning Commission meets tomorrow. We don't meet again before the 19th. So I'm not sure if the Select Board should have a position for that hearing, and a representative.
We look toward the Planning Commission to have that position, and I believe that's on their agenda for tomorrow evening.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, moving on, public comments. Yes. Chuck, I couldn't see you behind the hat and the mask.
That's good. My name is Chuck Fenton. I live on Brothers Road. I served on the ARPA committee this past spring. And I wanted to draw your attention to one of the top projects, which is the training for renewable and green energy. And I have some copies of that request for you to help.
Chuck, can I ask you to
Yeah.
hold a moment?
Sure.
There are a number of people in the room that also want to discuss or have something to say about ARPA.
Okay.
So let me see if there are any other public comments before we move to the ARPA and comments about that.
Fine, thanks.
Are there any other non-ARPA comments, public comments? Okay, hearing none, let's go on to old business and the ARPA financing and accounting. Let me just make some opening comments, and then I'll ask for the comments from the people in the room. But we are tonight discussing a financial accounting for the how the town handles the ARPA monies. Sarah Raitt is here with us from Two Rivers to help us with that discussion, and Dave and she will lead us through that discussion. So that's the purpose of the agenda item. I'll also just add that the select board, many meetings ago, reviewed the ARPA, the top 10 items suggested by the ARPA committee, the advisory group. We chose Damon Hall to address the drainage issue that's here. The rec center came up because we had applied for an ADA grant to address the handicap access. Did not get that grant as the state monies went to other projects, not necessarily ADA projects, but mostly housing projects. A study for the Cucci Road for the engineering and to approach the fix of the Cucci Road. The Jennyville box culvert, and then in a few meetings later, we added a salary adjustment to for town staff in light of the COVID experience, and primarily post-COVID, what we're going through right now with inflation. We are, I think I could probably cite 6 things off the top of my head very quickly that are town-related projects that the original quote has just risen exponentially because of inflation, or at least 9% was. So with that background, I do want to get to the main topic of financing and accounting, but Chuck, please, can I call you again?
Later or now?
Now, please.
Yes, I wanted to draw your attention, as I said a moment ago, to the training for renewable energy proposal, which was one of the top 10 proposals. And as I mentioned, I have made copies of that proposal and some supporting information for your edification. Sarah Bruce, who's chair of the Energy Committee and also served on the ARPA Committee, and who is here also this evening, she and I worked on this proposal. The motivation for it comes from the Energy Committee's focus on weatherization for homes and businesses in Hartland. Many towns in Vermont are also focused on weatherization, including those surrounding us. So the competition for skilled labor in this field is considerable. This project would train about 6 residents of Hartland in the latest in green energy and renewable energy skills, including, but not limited to, weatherization. The trainees would be expected to provide some post-graduation work on Hartland homes and businesses. This would not only offer us the opportunity to get more of this work done, but the trainees would have access to a very lucrative emerging occupation. Because this project is more complex than a town the size of Hartland could sponsor, Sarah and I, and that's Sarah Bruce, by the way, have discussed the possibility of partnering with Hartford in offering it. This would have manifold benefits for us in Hartland because Hartford is a larger town with more administrative capacity and is also home to the Regional Technical Education Center, which would be the site where the classroom aspect of the program would take place. The Hartford Energy Commission appears receptive to this arrangement. So we propose this training project to be offered early in 2023. Because the preferred training organization is beginning to compile their offerings for the next year, Sarah and I would encourage the board to evaluate this project within the next 30 days. And we would also ask that if approved, the town administration contact Hartford to complete a collaboration agreement. The executive director of the preferred training organization has offered to attend a future meeting, your future meeting, remotely to answer your questions, and as I'm sure you will need more reassurance than either Sarah, Bruce, or I can provide about this project. So I've prepared copies of the document in which she answers some of those questions, and it's the second page in the study packet. Thank you for listening.
You're welcome, Chuck. Again, I will just remind you that we have already discussed this item. So
Okay.
thank you for bringing it to our attention again.
Sure thing.
Okay. Any questions for Chuck at all? Okay. Additional,
I do have a question.
I'm sorry, Mary.
Sorry. There's such a dearth of labor available right now. I don't know if they disappeared in the rapture or what happened, but nobody's around to do anything. So where would these people come from? I mean, I'm looking like maybe we need a wider area than even just Hartford, but that might be unwieldy to coordinate. I don't know. Where does Hartford draw from? Do you know?
Well, this program has primarily been operated on the western side of the state, Chittenden County, Franklin, Washington County, and currently in Rutland County. And this organization that we've selected for training, Vermont Works for Women, has been engaged in this type of training for many years. And they have found that especially in this particular peer group of women and girls, there are many individuals who would jump at the chance to evolve their skills into something that is just a much more lucrative form of work, an area where they've been significantly denied in the past. So that is an aspect, I think, of identifying potential participants in this program. And I guess from my understanding, though, this is a question obviously the executive director can answer more fully than I, but my understanding is, and I worked with this organization back at the women's prison in the aught years. I was there working on some grants, and they were there building modular homes, which some of you may or may not remember. But at that time, I was really impressed. They had obviously a captive audience. These were people who were
Literally, yes.
right, and they still do that work in the Chittenden County area. But they've had many other examples of their work in the community, in the full community. So my understanding is that because they're offering an incentive to people to participate, to elevate their employment opportunities, that they've been having a pretty good response.
Oh, interesting. Okay, thank
So
you.
thank you for asking.
Thanks.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Waite from the Hartland Conservation Commission. Got a little updated information. I only had 4 because our printer was running out of copies. I'm also here representing the Hartland Conservation Commission and the Hartland Elementary School. We've been partnering for many years on a project to provide accessible access down to the outdoor classroom at the school. The project is completely ready to go. It lacks just about $20,000 worth of funding. We've already leveraged nearly $200,000 of non-town money towards this project. At this point, we have a design. We have someone who's ready to build it next summer. We secured a grant from the state, the Vermont Enhancement and Recreation Stewardship and Access Program. There was only 6 communities. There's 12 projects, funded out of 64 that went for funding statewide, and we were one of those. We were also the second highest project funded in terms of monetary award, and I think we should be pretty proud of that. As you know, from 2019, when we completed our trail design plan and budget, until 2022, the school was necessarily working on COVID-related adjustments, including having much more access and much more activity at the outdoor classroom area, which is exactly where we're trying to get access to. So the ARPA monies were something we applied for. We ranked highly with the committee. The select board seemed very receptive to it because it is a tiny amount of money to leverage a lot of funds and a lot of benefit for the community. And we have not been able, though, to make with the select board and are wondering if you can make a commitment towards that last bit of money. The state at this point is starting to make their contracts with the awardees. Dave and I and the school have been talking about how the monies would go, and basically it would be money that would go to the school would add it to the URSA grant and administer it, so the town would not have to administer it, the town would not be that contractor responsibility. We have already, like I said, ready for construction next summer. The school is going to administer the grant. It's absolutely related to COVID relief as access to the outdoor classroom. We have a couple questions that we answered back in April that I think I heard that were still being asked. One is, why can't the school come up with the $20,000? There, on the second page or the back page, you'll see that the school has their own source of ARPA funding that was fully committed quite a while ago, and there's links to their plans for the funds. We've had a ton of in-kind time from both school staff and certainly a lot of volunteer time enhancing the outdoor recreation areas during COVID, so they have been a very active partner. They, however, do not have $20,000 they can put into this at this point, and I think the principal of the school has joined us on the virtual, and there's several members of the commission here, so I'm happy to entertain any questions you have. But I'm really urging the select board to be able to take this step, because we have done a lot of work to get to this point, and it is covering a gap in funding created by the COVID crisis and created by the delay in funding and the increases Phil was just talking about in costs of everything. That's our request.
Jennifer, a couple of questions. I'm sure you're all very aware that the select board and previous select boards have backed the project, and that the project is, legally speaking, a school project. There's a document that was signed saying that the school...
We have an agreement, yep, with the school.
Is doing that and using the town land for that project. I think we're all hopeful that non-school citizens and the folks other than students will use the facility
And we have
once it's completed.
talked about that outside of classroom hours, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, the school, I know that there's a dichotomy with the funding. The school has a completely different funding source, but these are our kids, this is our school. So I want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind, that this is a town facility and the school is a town facility.
Sure.
That I know we get different funding sources, but this is something for all of us.
And the contract with the granting agency is in the school's name?
Yes, it's going to the school, which from what when talking to Dave about it, I mean, that's a lot simpler kind of process. It gives the school the contracting authority, and the town doesn't have to run anything, and I would still be the coordinator for the Conservation Commission, the school, for getting the project, continuing the project, and putting it on the ground.
You would have a role in the project?
I would have, I mean, the role I've had right now, which is keeping everything going, but the school is the contractor, and the school 17-acre committee.
And I assume the contractor would have a project manager and all that sort of thing?
Yes, Josh Ryan of Timber and Stone was the one who created it in 2019, created the detailed site plan. He is the company with the people that work for him. He's done many, many projects around the state, so if you ever get a chance to go on his site, or I'm happy to share any information about the kinds of accessible, unpaved accessible trail projects he's done. Many of them are at public institutions, parks, places, public places, just like the kind we have at 17-acre wood. Escobag, right? He did Escobag.
Yeah, no, those references were in that original
Right.
finding.
And he also wanted to make sure that you knew that the $19,965 increase there was no padding in there. He said that it's absolutely direct cost of the increase in the pressure treated lumber and the increase in the trucking. He didn't add anything in terms of an hourly increase for wages or anything like that. It was just cost increase, which has been crazy.
Well, I think we're all between a rock and a hard place here because, you know, the select board has allocated the 5 projects, and this was not one of them, nor was the energy. And I hadn't been aware that the school had allocated their ARPA monies to another project.
I did answer all those questions in April. There was a Q&A that was supposed to be shared with you. It was also shared with the ARPA committee because I remembered that that was a question at that point. And I shared the information that's on the back of this page to be shared with you.
Can I get clarification?
Excuse me.
No, it's just important information. If you didn't get that information, that would,
I'm not saying that I didn't get the information.
Yeah.
I can tell you that there's been a lot of information flowing on ARPA projects and town plans, so forgive me if I'm not recalling directly.
no, I just want to make sure everybody had that information before they were making decisions about which pieces would be worthy of funding, because that's important.
Right. Have you asked the school for the funds?
Yes, back in the spring, before we even applied for the ARPA funds.
So it's, can I,
I'm a little confused by the timing, but go ahead, Mary.
well, it's also possible, I hope everybody else doesn't hate me for this, that we have money that could be other than ARPA that could be applied to this project. Is that a possibility?
But I'm just a little confused. So we haven't allocated all our money, right? We allocated small portions for a few different projects.
We bookmarked the 5 projects that we thought the money's going toward.
You talking at a select board meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, but it was small amounts for like an engineering study for Damon Hall Rec Center, Queechee Road.
With full recognition that the studies had to be tailored to the amount of money that was available.
Right.
We realized that we were going to very easily overextend the ARPA monies that we had.
Right, but for the buildings, for example, the target was 250,000, right? We allocated a portion to go and do the studies needed to spend the 250,000, right? But we didn't allocate projects that would have eaten up $1 million, right?
Jim, I'm not sure, I think I'm trying to say the same thing as I think you are. You're correct that the actual allocation was to start the process of how to use the money on those 5 projects. We are very aware that the water penetration, the mold,
Well,
the
I don't wanna argue
ADA
against
access,
those projects. My point is
is
that,
going to exceed that
Yeah.
amount.
I guess that's the part I'm confused on. When I left that meeting, I felt like we took the initial steps, but we would circle back to the rest of the projects at a later date to discuss and fund those. So I don't know if anybody else had that recollection.
So if I can just add though, but we haven't even gotten to the point where we know what the estimated cost of these projects are gonna be, so,
Sure.
you know, so we've got an idea, so we kind of essentially gave the green light to the Jennyville Culvert project.
Yeah.
And essentially gave the green light to the Queechee, which was simply a study.
Right.
I believe, my understanding is that both the rec center and Damon Hall were a go. It was a matter of how much of the rec center and Damon Hall we would be able to do with the money and you know, bringing on an architect and looking at the 2 buildings and giving us a roadmap of the work that needed to be done, you know, but my impression is that we would be cutting out of that picture, not necessarily adding. I think there was kind of an understanding that between the rec center and Damon Hall, there's quite a bit to do here. So we would, you know, as we work along on this, essentially be cutting pieces out and not necessarily taking
Cutting pieces out of the ARPA proposals or out of the rec center in Damon
the
Hall?
rec center and Damon Hall.
Okay.
so surely we have $20,000 somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3%, between the two projects, it's 3% of the total ARPA funds.
So I'm not, let's not even, if we could forget about ARPA,
Yeah.
because then we can cut through any arguments about where the money's gonna be allocated. Surely we have $20,000 that we could allocate somewhere.
Like about 27.
I think the
Eric,
planning
you could-
commission would like to have that $20,000 to do their survey right now.
Right, but also their survey,
Right.
that's not coming, that's not as urgent. This is, I see as urgent, and their survey is not, because the town plan doesn't expire till what, 2025? So, you know, that could come out of another budget.
Which is, you know, kind of why we need to understand all the funds and
Right.
money available so we can make the decisions.
So, and we can get into that later, but there's really not money just readily available.
There's $1 million of ARPA money in the bank.
Correct, but you've got 4 projects that will probably eat up $1 million. You've also got,
Okay, so that's the part I don't understand.
You've
Because
also-
when
yep,
we
bear with
voted on
me.
the projects, they each had a
bear with me.
dollar amount in there.
Can I finish, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank
So-
you. You've also got so we've talked about several things. So you got, let's back up even further. You got the Three Corners intersection that the last we heard was $500,000 over budget, okay? So if you want readily available money, sure, we have highway surplus money that is in that ballpark. If we have $500,000 over budget, that pool is gone, okay? We've also got Clay Hill Road that is going to be over budget this year by $75,000, $150,000 next year. That's $200,000 that we talked about backfilling with ARPA money. The Jennyville Road project in and of itself is about a $200,000 project. Before we get to the 2 buildings, which will take some scoping, and sure, maybe it's $200,000 or maybe it's $400,000. But I think that, and this is actually part of the agenda item that we haven't even gotten to, as far as kind of moving along and doing this at a pace that we can identify these costs and, you know, figure out what we're going to be able to do and what we're not going to be able to do. And I think we've got a way to do that, but it's essentially one step at a time.
I guess I'm just struggling. So we gave a committee a job to do.
Yep.
They did the job, they came back with recommendations, and these are some very small requests. And it sounds like we're kind of backpedaling away from those recommendations.
There were an awful lot of requests on that list,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, the hard part for me is where to stop. I mean, I think, you know, there's members of the committee here, we worked hard, we saw a lot of social-related items, housing-related items, infrastructure-related items, so on and so forth. So the question is, how do we can't deal with them all, you know. You know, I had favorites and they're not on the list. But, you know,
But we have a lost opportunity, it sounds like, on a couple.
Well,
We don't-
a couple of things, Jennifer. Have we gone back to the granting agency to say inflation's happening across Vermont? Can you help us here?
The URSA grants are a one-shot deal, sort of like the ARPA grants are as well. We were only allowed to apply for what the designer had budgeted in the initial plan that we had done, that we got the Wellborn grant for.
Yeah.
Which, and because this is so directly related to COVID relief, as the ARPA funds are designed for, this seemed like the absolute perfect place to provide the matching funds.
Right. And what is the contingency funding part that was built into the grant?
In terms of initially, it was a small contingency. I can go back and look at the numbers. There's always like a 10% or so, but it wasn't nearly enough to cover another $10,000 worth of work,
Okay.
or $20,000 worth of work. We've we've done our homework. We've really been working this and figuring out what we can do, how we can close that gap. And this is really the place that makes the most sense in terms of funding. It's such a small amount relative to the opportunity that the town has and relative to leveraging what we've been working on. So I'm really hoping that we can find it with this source somehow, because it's the best fit. There isn't a lot of money out there for, even for accessible trails work.
And this is a shovel-ready project.
This is shovel-ready, it's
Yeah.
ready to go.
You've got definite
We're on the
numbers.
agenda for next summer, but we have to pull that last bit of money together before we can finalize any kind of paperwork or.
I would like to ask to see if the school can come up with half, and maybe we can come up with half. Would you guys entertain that?
What are the chances that the school's gonna come up with that?
What are the chances we're gonna come up with?
We can, well, our chances are better. Aren't we getting more ARPA money? I heard it on the radio.
We
There's
got
another.
our second payment of the ARPA
Oh,
money.
oh,
The second tranche, is that the?
Yeah, they said half of it last year at this time, and I filled it earlier, and then we just got. the
And
second
Mary, please,
half.
I read that sentence and said, wow, and then I realized it was the
oh.
second.
I heard it on the radio.
Not sure we've even got the county portion yet, but we've got, 90% of it. But that's what it was.
To me, even you could ask 20 individuals for $1,000. I mean, it's not, you're right, it's not a lot of money,
It's not a lot of money, but
but trying to get it, yeah.
we've been asking to get to this point already, as well as having a lot of in-kind and volunteer time. We've talked, the school is completely behind this project. They don't have funds kicking around either.
The last thing I'll say is, I think it is a small amount of money, right? Committee put it together. I'm a little worried about holding back money, right? Say we know the 3 corners is over by $500,000 today, or, based on the bid that was rejected, a few months ago. If it's over by if it's over by $1 million when it goes out to rebid, are we really gonna be able to do it, right? And, do we lose opportunities because we, didn't pull the trigger on them?
When do you need the money by?
The state is making their contracts right now this month, and probably before a couple months goes by, we need to be able to sign those, but we can't do that in good faith unless we have that 20,000 secured or promised, or at least we know where it's going to be coming from next summer.
Rob Henry has to say.
I think we have someone with their hand up.
Rob.
Could let Rob enter.
Chico, you, Rob Henry, with his hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Online, I'm sorry. Rob, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak. There you go.
Okay, I'm unmuted. So a couple of things. I think that there are expenses that the town has to commit to every year. There are things like replacing culverts and ditches and taking care of Damon Hall. I think that the ARPA money was a unique opportunity to do some other things that were maybe a little more unusual. And so I would hate to see us waste this chance to get $170,000 for the accessible trail so that we can put in a box culvert in a ditch. It feels to me like we're cheating on the ARPA, what the sense of ARPA was about. So that's all I got to say.
Rob is our Conservation Commission chair, if anybody doesn't know.
So we've heard from everybody. Clyde, we haven't heard from you. What do you think about this?
Well, seems though that if we're gonna lose out on the whole thing, it's an investment that we could make, and we can, if we have to, we can make it up and replace the money. We'll work it into next year's budget to get the money back, you know. It's kind of like, you know, not buying a bottle when you could fill it 10 times or more, just because you don't have money to buy the bottle. You find a way to do it, so. But I would say that we could find, if we can designate the money and do it, then we can go back to the well again and replace it. You know, so, and make it known that donations are available to be sent to us. I know everybody's donating next Friday, but. So.
Again, the part that doesn't sit well with me is where is the school on this? Yes, the answer is they committed their money.
Seems like they're fully behind it, Bill.
They're fully behind it, and they've
We were
committed
fully
many
behind
time
it.
and resources
And
to
we
do it.
signed legal documents saying we are behind this.
Right.
So, you know, I now, all of a sudden, after we have worked to sort of painfully sort of say there are 5 things we're going to work on with the ARPA money, now we're coming back to, you know, to ask us for it. So it's not that we aren't behind it. I mean, it's totally logical that if you have 7/8 of the project paid for, or 15/16, or whatever the amount is, that we're this close. That's why I asked if there's some way we can share the expense between the 2 entities.
Well, that's part of my misunderstanding. I never thought we were limiting ourselves to lose things. I thought that was our first pass through ARPA.
I thought, in my mind, it was pretty clear that's what we were doing. You know, I think that's why it was such a hard decision for me to come to. Mandy.
I have some thoughts. So as I have kids that go to the school, and I have to say that the classroom is wonderful. When my daughter was in kindergarten, we went down. I spent a lot of Wednesdays in the woods. And I would agree that the path is very steep. It can be a little treacherous. The kids navigate it quite well. I do hear what you're saying, and I wonder if it's possible to just ask the school, because this is 6 months later. Things change, situations change. I don't see if, you know, if there's a couple of months left before, right, is what I was hearing.
Yeah, I mean, the school, we're talking with the school and working with the committee all the time, so there isn't money that they've been able to find at this point. We can ask again, but
perhaps
maybe,
if you know, if what we're thinking is, you know, we do half, you do half. I feel like that's a really good compromise, and I definitely agree that this is an asset to the kids and to the community, so it definitely.
and we have until the spring to actually obligate the money. So, but I think we need to know that before we can in good conscience come into any kinds of agreement on the entire project, we need to know that funding is going to be there by the time the spring comes. So if we could come up with a letter of agreement. I think the first step would be to talk to the school again, although we've had these conversations, but we can certainly approach them again and say, what about this timeline? Like Mandy was suggesting, and split it between the ARPA funds, or Mary, however you feel like you could find the other 10,000 between now and the spring.
With the magnifying glass. No, actually, between these two, I think it's possible.
Okay.
I'm not speaking for you, Dave, but I think in this millions of dollars budget that we have, there's gotta be either $10,000 or $20,000.
It's only 20% of the school budget.
Well, it's
Yeah,
like-
I know. But still, I think,
Well, why don't we take that step?
Yeah, okay.
reapproach the school.
Then can we put this on the agenda for the next meeting to tie?
Well, I would sort of, once we hear from the school, I think we can get it right on the agenda.
Okay.
I'd be happy to do that.
Christine might be on the call, but I'll talk to the committee and we'll talk to them and say, we can do 10,000, if you can do 10,000, we can bring it together.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
All right, thank you for all your time. I know this was a lot of your meeting and I appreciate it.
Well, and thank you, Jennifer. I sure hope the school is as appreciative of the legwork that you did in actually doing the grant.
Oh, they are all over this, so you don't have to worry about their enthusiasm or their commitment to this project, but
Okay,
I appreciate that.
good. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Yes, please. Can you come forward, please?
My name is Diane Bibby, and truthfully, as one of the older citizens in town, and one who formerly had children in the school and did a lot of volunteer work and built the athletic field many years ago down there, I'm sorry to admit to being so out of touch, but I had no idea that you were in quite such a bind. Obviously, we listened to all the ARPA meetings and knew how that went, but I'm wondering how many of the people who are not directly connected either to the Conservation Committee or the school, because they now have children at the school, are aware of the conundrum. And as Mary said, or Clyde mentioned, that donations are welcome from other people in the town who are not now any longer directly connected with our school, even though we've always been supportive of it. So I would hope that perhaps the people who are working so hard on this project could in some way make the situation more available to other people in the town who are not, maybe I'm the only one, who isn't aware of the situation. So I just offer that as a thought that when we built the library, we spent a lot of time fundraising for the new library. And like you, we had to go back to the town to finish. We didn't quite raise the $400,000 that we needed to build a new library. So the town kind of picked up the amount that we needed to finish it. So
Thank you.
it's a tradition in town.
Yeah.
You know, others help others.
Yeah, no, I think a number of us here.
But I can understand the conundrum, so you
Yeah.
know, it's
Okay.
not easy for everybody.
Thank you.
Just wanted to offer that thought.
Any other comments before we get to the accounting finance piece of it? Okay, Dave, you want to start us on that, please?
Yep, so in moving forward with the actual ARPA projects that we did discuss, I had spent some time speaking with Sarah Ray from Two Rivers Queechee Regional Commission, who also helped us with the community aspect of the ARPA meetings back in January. And other than VLCT, Two Rivers and Sarah has been kind of go-to resource for all things ARPA. So I started off with her on procurement and what we may need to do for procurement on particularly like the Jennyville project or even on the buildings. And the discussion came back around to procurement, the federal strings, and particularly the timing that we have. Needs to be allocated by the end of December 2024, and how the towns see that as a, and VLCT and Two Rivers see that as, fair amount of trouble actually, as far as the work that needs to be done throughout the state and the capacity of engineers, contractors, architects, et cetera, to do that work. So in doing so, Sarah came up with, in speaking with the LCT, a pretty savvy way to move forward on this, that Two Rivers, myself, and VLCT are in concert in an effective way to move forward. And you know, I'll introduce Sarah. Some of you, Sarah's new to you, but to introduce the discussion on this.
Sarah, can I, one moment, we use VLCT quite a bit. It's the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, which is an organization which has been created to support legal and HR and many other issues at the town level. So just wanted to let you know that. Thank you, Sarah.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sarah Rader, which is the senior planner with the V.S.A. Regional Commission. And as Dave laid out for you, VLCT has been working with towns across the state, supporting them as they're trying to figure out how to use their ARPA funds efficiently, effectively, and legally. Their legal team and their government finance experts have been deliberating on various strategies for towns to take, and they've blessed a particular approach that will help towns to maximize the flexibility in the use of their funds, right? So you've already taken one step in doing that, in that you've declared the entirety of your award to be considered lost revenue, which means it can be used for the provision of government services. That's a very broad envelope. That means, as you know, any kind of government service that any city, state, or county anywhere in the country would offer. And so you've already taken that first step. Another step that you can choose to take if you wish would be to basically use your ARPA dollars to pay off salaries and benefits of your current operating budget and your operating budget for the next couple of years, which would then create a surplus in your general fund. That surplus money is no longer federal in its nature, which means it is no longer subject to ARPA regulations. It's no longer subject to ARPA timelines. The only rules that you really have to abide by are your own town's policies and procedures for how to dispose of surplus funds. So, that said, that is a legally blessed strategy that towns can take if they're stressed about, in particular, meeting the timeline, because we're seeing a lot of towns in our region and around the state starting to realize that large construction projects, other projects that need permitting, engineering work, maybe you have to run it through town meeting day, the timeline's getting short in order to get those funds contracted by, that means obligated, means written contracted, down in place with your service provider by the end of calendar year 2024. So we're encouraging all towns to consider this approach. Obviously, it has no impact on the actual projects that you've selected. All you're simply doing is maximizing the flexibility of those funds. You're changing the character of those funds from federal in character to local in character, which reduces the regulations that you have to follow. And the reason why we suggest paying off salaries and benefits within your current operating budget is that that allows you to sidestep federal procurement regulations, because those are non-contracted portions of your budget, right? If you were to, for example, pay off a part of your budget that was, I don't know, a current construction project, and you were working with some contractor in the town or next town over, you would have to make sure you're abiding by federal formal competitive bid procedures, right? So again, this is just trying to make it as easy as possible for you to get these monies, you know, in a place where you can spend them as you wish. Basically, the recommendation is pay off the non-contracted portions of your operating budget. And Dave, you had asked a question at one point in time about whether it would be possible to sort of allocate ARPA funds to salaries and benefits payments that have already been made, so sort of a retroactive. I had a conversation with VLCT about that this afternoon. They said that theoretically that is possible because ARPA technically covers expenses starting March 3rd of 2021. However, the accounting piece of that is really where the rubber hits the road, and so they would encourage you to reach out to Sarah Macy, who's the sort of point person up at VLCT, who's really working with towns on a case-by-case basis to figure out the accounting nuances and make sure that your ledger doesn't raise any red flags for auditors. Her services are fantastic. Can't recommend her highly enough. She's helping a lot of folks in our region right now figure out those details. I hope that's helpful.
So how many years of salaries and benefits can we pay off?
So you can go from March 3rd of 2021 through the end of calendar year of 2026. That's the full ARPA expense timeframe.
So I can just add to that, and based upon my conversation with Sarah, I did turn around and have an extensive conversation with Sarah Macy, as well as our own auditor. And in our case, we generally have more than $1,046,000 or $1,043,000 in wages. That is wages, that is employee taxes, or employer taxes for the employee, that is
So
the pension.
salary and benefits,
Yep.
all inclusive, is more than $1 million.
More than $1,046,000. So based upon kind of what you're saying there, we can look at, kind of keep it clean and keep it to this fiscal year, provided that we hit the $1,046,000. Sarah's recommendation, Sarah Macy from VLCT, was to make the transfer from ARPA against payroll quarterly, based upon the 941 quarterly reports that we do for payroll. So we would make 4 transfers for the year and essentially go through that $1,046,000.
And you'd leave yourself $1,046,000 in surplus from the general fund at the end of the year.
And then we have, yes, we have $1,043,000 in the general fund balance, and that would essentially be free of the federal string, so to speak.
The general fund balance can be used to pay highway expenses.
So it would be, the answer would be that you could use this money essentially for what you have pegged it for ARPA use.
The state legislature did remove the distinction between highway and general funds within municipal budgets this past legislative session. So if you were to create a surplus within your highway budget or in your general fund, they could be used for any kind of project.
Is that just for this year, or?
That happened this past legislative session.
And it's for going forward?
Yes, that's correct.
Sarah, I have an athletic background during which it was always good to be first. And then I worked in higher ed during the early internet craze, and it was always good to be first to offer a service so the school would be ranked in various ways. But I'm scared to be first in this. Can you tell me if other towns have done this already?
So yes, my understanding is that numerous towns around the state right now are working on this right now. And that's Sarah Macy's job really, is to get on the phone with them and talk with the finance administrators for each town and say, okay, tell me what your budget look like and let's make sure that everything's lined up perfectly. So yes, and it's already been blessed by VLCT's legal team.
Are there any unintended consequences, catch-22s that anyone was worried about?
Not that I'm aware of. Nobody at VLCT has put out any warnings on that front, and they've been very cautious. We've been having these conversations for a good year and a half now, and they've been good partners, and they've been considering all angles, and I really haven't heard any negative aspects of this.
So Phil, to answer you, I did speak directly to Morristown, who is doing this, and I know Stowe is doing it as well, so I know 2 concrete ones, and they seem to be yelling from a rooftop.
Great. Sarah, I'm looking at the memo that I received a copy of, which you explained this. I probably should have sent it to the others, I apologize. In one of the last paragraphs, you talked about the Treasury makes a distinction between beneficiaries and subrecipients. Can you help me clarify that and how it impacts what we're talking about?
So that particular paragraph really addresses situations if you are only going to use your ARPA dollars as ARPA dollars, retaining their federal character. If you were to take this other path where you're changing the nature of it into local funds by generating a surplus, that no longer applies.
Okay.
But this is really about towns that have already, for example, spent some money, right? And so they didn't allocate the entirety of their award as lost revenue, and they're not gonna pay the surplus money, they just wanna spend the ARPA dollars as federal dollars. If you do that under federal regulations, under ARPA's final rule, there's a distinction between a subrecipient and a beneficiary, with the idea being that some towns, for example, are interested in, for example, making grants to a business, right? So a business that's struggling in town. In that particular scenario, Treasury says, well, that business is a beneficiary of the town. Versus, for example, if you were to contract with or give money to an organization that is going to perform services on behalf of the town. For example, you pay your contractor who normally does public outreach for you to do some special public outreach around a particular project, right? They're doing contracted services on behalf of the town. The difference there really arises in the town's obligations for reporting to Treasury, because if you are giving money in a subrecipient fashion, the reporting obligations are much more extensive than they would be for just a beneficiary. So that's really the key purpose of that paragraph, is to make sure people read that part of the guidance so that they're not creating more work for themselves than they have to. I think a lot of people assume that, you know, every grant is a subrecipient relationship, and that's not the case, and it saves you a lot of reporting work if you can parse that out for yourself.
Okay, one more question. Suppose we go down this path and we end up with $1 million surplus in the general fund at the end of the year. Does that $1 million still require select board approval to be spent?
So you would have to follow whatever your town's policies and procedures are for the disposition of surplus funds. My understanding is that the town has established policies around that, and I would defer to Dave on what the requirements are.
Yeah, I mean, I'll bring it up, but, you know, I'll bring up another fund, but you're literally going from kind of one fund to another.
Right.
You know, I would envision, you know, setting up something that resembles, I wouldn't call it an ARPA fund, but something that resembles that, or whatever, you know, the vision is of these projects, and put it in that, and, you know, go forward. I think that, you know, here we are, so none of this is being spent without select board, you know, decision-making, so.
I'm just thinking from a policy perspective.
Yeah.
Right, if there's wherever the money comes from, if there's $1 million in surplus, sorry, I can't say it, in the general fund.
Yeah.
To spend that money.
Yeah.
Is select board approval required?
So ordinarily, no,
Okay,
but,
so that's
but let me,
the answer I was
let me
going.
continue. So, you know, the goal of this is to put this into a fund, and we
Okay.
can put it to the voters and say, let's put it together an infrastructure fund, yet another fund. But yes, it would go into that, but we do account for this, and it does show up in several places, and it's for everybody to see. So Martin and I are not gonna go and spend $1,046,000 without,
Right.
you know, knowing that this is intended for 5 to 6 projects. So the idea is to keep this extremely transparent, because as you know, there's 6 people here tonight that wanna see these projects done. So even if it just sat in the fund balance and didn't go to an infrastructure fund, for instance, let's just say it sits in the fund balance, that's gonna pop up as to, you know, what that fund balance is every year. So, you know, we're gonna have to account for that, where that money goes to,
Right.
you know, whether it be to the select board, or more importantly, to the public, as to where that $1,043,000 has gone. So, we generally don't spend any money that the select board hasn't approved, or has not seen, or has not been budgeted, or has not been anything, hasn't happened. Even if we take $500,000 and put it towards the Three Corners intersection project, you're gonna know about it.
So I thought he was asking if it needed, voter approval.
So no,
That was more select board approval. So my, yeah, unintended consequence, are we putting $1 million somewhere we can just be spent for anything without our approval? technically, that could happen, but what Dave is saying is he's not gonna do that without select board approval.
And I suspect this conversation may come up at some point tonight, or if not, in a couple of weeks. But again, this money is accounted for pretty tightly.
Correct.
And we present it at least once a year if you know where to go for it. I think that particularly since it went through any time, but in this case, particularly since you're taking the money and moving it from one place and putting it in another essentially, and the high expectation is that you're gonna spend this $1,043,000 on these things, well then, we're gonna track that as we go,
Right.
and you're gonna get the updates and everything as you go along. So, I would say, let's create a fund for it, because then it's a little bit more separate, because if it's just in the fund balance,
Yeah.
that number is probably gonna be higher than $1,043,000, so it's, you may kind of lose track of it a little bit. Therefore, if you put it in that separate fund, call it, say, an infrastructure fund, it's $1,043,000 to start, and then if it's 500, 1,000, all of a sudden, it's like, okay, where did that go?
There's no concerns about moving it from the general fund into its own reserve fund after that.
Not that I'm aware of, but again, that's a conversation to have with the government finance expert of the VLCT, just to explain exactly how to do that without raising any red flags for auditors.
And based upon what we have done, I would go so far as to say, put that as an article on the ballot and say, hey, we're gonna create an infrastructure fund, and therefore it's as transparent as can be.
Thank you.
So I see benefits in doing this and being able to meet the timelines that the ARPA guidelines require, both the contractual as well as spending the money. That it eliminates month-to-month federal reporting that we would need to do, or whatever the period reporting is if we did not do it as we spend those monies. And just gives us that time frame flexibility, should we not spend it all by 2026, that we still have it. Dave, I'm not sure what you need from us tonight. Do you need a motion that we
Yeah,
move
I'd like
forward?
to get a motion, but let me just come back to Jim's question for a second. I think may put everybody a little bit more at ease. So the only real way you're gonna spend fund balance is to run a deficit. So as soon as you run a deficit, so fund balance is essentially equity in the everyday world. So the only way you're gonna eat up that fund balance is if in your income statement, which is our budget, for instance, when we do a budget presentation, you have revenues and expenses, which is essentially an income statement. The only way you're gonna eat up that fund balance is to exceed the budgeted amount, or to have more expenses than revenues. So if we were to
Which
start.
could happen in an inflationary environment.
Yep, so, exactly, so, but we've got a general fund balance, which is meant for the deficit spending, unless you choose to use the ARPA money, which is also a part of your fund balance at this point. But the expense is gonna pop up, so let's just say, we'll stick with Clay Hill, and we run, Clay Hill costs $400,000, which is $250,000 more than what we've got, or $200,000 more than what we've got budgeted. That $400,000 is gonna pop up on the budget. So then you're gonna say, okay, let's just say the year ends there and everything else is equal, we're $200,000 over, which is gonna eat into your fund balance. We have, the ARPA money would be part of that fund balance, or you've got something else set up. The choice would then be, at the end of the year, what are you gonna do with this $200,000 deficit? How do you wanna handle it? You want it coming from the ARPA, or do you want it coming from the reserve account that we've got set up for this purpose? And it may very well be ARPA because you wanna save the reserve fund for something else, or you may wanna eat into the reserve fund because whatever. But it really can't not be transparent.
Correct.
Let me put it that way.
Thank you.
I do want to make a point about reporting, just to be clear. So this strategy of creating a surplus in your general fund does not absolve you from reporting requirements to federal treasury. Basically, your reporting to federal treasury would still be on the same annual time frame that's currently required, and you would say, we used our money to pay for salaries and benefits for this particular time period. That would be your reporting. If you were to take the alternative approach and use your ARPA funds directly as federal dollars, you would have the same sort of level of effort for reporting. Really, the benefit of creating a surplus, that strategy, lies in eliminating the number of federal regulations that you have to deal with, and then also giving you timeline flexibility for the use of those funds.
Okay, back to what I asked.
I would like to see a motion that we utilize ARPA funding to offset operational expenses. And to, I would kind of leave it at that. I would leave it at that.
But is it limited to salary and benefits, or can it be any operational expense?
It could be an operational expense, but the recommendation from VLCT is salaries and benefits, because those are non-contracted portions of your budget and therefore not subject to federal procurement regulations.
So we should look
And then you could say operated specifically wages and benefits.
Okay, we don't have to name the target for where the new surplus will go.
I think that, you know, you will need to, this will be a December, January question when we usually go into how we want to address surpluses. And I think that that would be addressed at that point as to, okay, we foresee a surplus, how would we like to deal with it?
And how quickly should we do this, if we assume we make the motion?
I would make the first transfer in October 1st with the first quarterly 941 payment.
Okay. And then go forward based on every 941 filing?
Yep.
Okay. Additional discussion, thoughts?
If I get the gist of it right, it loosens up I mean, we've still got the money, but down the road, we don't have quite as many strings attached to it. Not as many hoops to jump through.
Absolutely. So in talking with Sarah, just on the management of the project, you have potentially like Davis-Bacon requirements and et cetera, which gets into wage requirements and regulations and et cetera, which are really difficult to kind of handle. Two Rivers does it on projects, and they can be a partner, but that would go away. I think more importantly, coming back to what I was saying in the earlier part of this discussion, kind of allows a little bit more of that one step at a time mentality versus, you know, it's going to scattershot because it's got to be done or allocated by 2024. That's not to say we completely drag our heels, because obviously, though, I think the Three Corners intersection project is a prime example. The longer you go, the less your dollars are going to be worth. So you don't want to go on forever, but it certainly allows us to continue to work on these two buildings, Jennyville Road, and to get through the Three Corners intersection project to see what that will actually entail as we move forward.
So, let's say we do this, and the ARPA funds become surplus funds. We have the discretion as to when we spend that money, right? We don't have to commit it by the end of 2026.
That is correct, right. And once it becomes local in character, there is no federal timeline attached to that.
Okay. That does give us a lot more flexibility.
Absolutely, especially for large projects.
Okay. Someone want to take a stab at a motion?
I think I have it. Make a motion to utilize ARPA funding for operational expenses, specifically wages and benefits. That's what we're going for.
Phil, could you repeat that loud enough for everybody to hear?
I would make a motion to utilize ARPA funding for operational expenses, specifically wages and benefits.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
But I ask if there's any more discussion.
Is there any additional discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. I think that's it for our ARPA discussion.
Thank you, Sarah. That was really clear. Appreciate it.
I think we blew our 20-minute allocation for that. You did.
Okay.
Okay, going on, our next old business item is the town plan update. As folks know, at the last meeting, some additional idiosyncrasies and errors were brought to our attention in the town plan. And I suggested at the time that the best course of action would be for the select board to reject the plan, request the planning commission work out those inconsistencies, look to identify any other errors, react to some of the comments that were made, many of the comments that were made by town citizens. And my hope would be that there would be a professional survey done of the town to gauge the various levels of interest in some of the rural area issues that came up. And the third thing I was hoping is that the planning commission would proceed to work with the town staff to come up with grant funding opportunities for the survey and to cover any administrative costs associated with our regional commission helping us with that. So that's my attempt at a summary of what we talked about at the last select board meeting. Any thoughts or comments from my colleagues?
So just, I'll never get through a topic without having some type of comment. I think it's fine for us to send the plan back to the planning commission. You know, I think they can work on it, resolve any remaining issues. You know, the plan is pretty far along as it is, and you know, certainly Sean has done a lot of the work in terms of corrections and filling in census data and things like that. So, kind of mentally, I don't think there's a lot of work to do on the plan itself that the planning commission can't finish fairly quickly. I think the survey is probably the heavy lifting, right? So, I think we can make a motion to send the plan back. But I think we ought to have the planning commission, explore a grant, right? Get a quote on how much the survey would be, and then come back with what they've learned so that we can decide if it makes sense to wait for a grant, if it's going to be a long timeline, or if we should fund the survey independently. Because what I don't think would be in the best interest of the town is to delay the adoption of a new town plan that's been designed to correct some inconsistencies in our existing town plan. the longer we wait, the more we expose the town to potential development that may not be in the best interest of the town.
So you are suggesting that a survey be done
Right.
first?
Suggesting survey be done, but I'm suggesting they come back with a quote and whatever research they've done on the grant. And then we decide, right, if we decide we don't want to fund it, if it's up to us to fund it, and we decide we're not gonna fund it for some reason, then I would say the planning commission should go ahead and submit the plan without a survey. So I think the onus is on us, if we want a survey. And if grant funding is not available, that we pay for it and get this plan done.
Right. I did some research online myself in the last couple of days, and there are groups out there that would assist the town in planning grants. Knowing what we're all going through with inflation and the rec center as an example, where the state moved monies for ADA into the housing environment, I'm not going to sort of say, we'll get it on that part. So, but I think in spirit, I think what I'm hearing you say, I'm in agreement that we really ask for three things. One, to go back and work on the plan, to go after grant funding, but to pursue a quality survey that goes after some of the issues. That's it.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, the planning commission has a budget every year. How much is in that money? How much money is in the?
So we've talked about this a bit. So they have $2,000 in their budget.
That's it?
That's it. But the concept has been for them to do some research, and we kind of put this out to them for a few weeks now, but do some research, get some pricing. They would need to have something back to me by November 1st in order to budget it for next fiscal year, which is kind of what we've been talking about.
Right, but which is fine. But if they come back by November 1st with a quote, this is, we can get this done now, I'm not sure we should, put a roadblock in front of them and make them wait until next year.
Well, I think we're getting we're getting out of sync here. We're talking about timing, and I'd like to stay at the policy conceptual level and make sure we're.
And there's also a reserve fund for the planning commission that's got about $1,800 that could get transferred over there.
This survey is gonna cost a lot of money.
But there's a little bit of money there.
It's like an Act 200 fund.
Right. We're not gonna spend it on that, might as well move it to the planning commission budget.
Okay. So I have a very well-written motion here that I'd like to make. Motion to reject the town plan draft dated March 11, 2022, sending the plan back to the planning commission to address the inconsistencies of the village district in the land use chapter, both in the text and the future land use map, and then review and address any additional inconsistent language within the land use chapter and the document as a whole.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on that motion? Clyde, you okay?
No, it sounds straightforward.
As Mary writes.
No, I'm just gonna take it from here. I did not write this motion. I was not giving myself praise.
I do that because I thought I heard a grammatical inconsistency.
No, there's a very long sentence. Very, very long.
So I'm going to check the air on my tires before I go home here. Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous, thank you. Do you want to try for one of
I'll take a stab at the second one here.
Okay.
Okay. So I'd make a motion that the select board strongly urges that the planning commission conduct a professional survey of town residents that incorporates input from the planning commission, select board, and town residents.
I'll second that.
So strongly urges is not a requirement.
I don't think legally we can make any requirements of our colleagues on the Conservation Commission. They are their own entities, so we,
Planning commission. That's okay. That's okay.
thank you. So that's why I chose, we strongly urge on that part. Any discussion?
I'm curious from the planning commission, have you looked into outside agencies, and is there any sort of time frame that you're aware of or cost that you're aware of?
We haven't gone that far.
Okay, I just was curious if that had, you know.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. The paper passing.
And finally, I would like to make a motion that the planning commission seek grant funding in conjunction with town staff to cover survey costs and any regional commission administrative costs.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Clyde. Any discussion on pursuing grant opportunities?
Seeking grant funding, I completely agree with, but if grant funding does not happen, there's no assumption that the survey won't move forward. Right?
I think that's, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Additional comments?
Do we have town employees that are able to assist them?
I was waiting for the motion to pass or
Okay.
fail, but yes, so the date actually just came out today, and grants, the most recent round of planning grants is due, the application is due December 1st. I've spoken to Sean. Sean has some capacity to help put together and work with Two Rivers on putting a grant together for the survey and for Two Rivers work. And it's never guaranteed, but you know, we can provide the support.
And Sean will work with the planning commission on that as well.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Great. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 It's unanimous. Any other town plan items at this point?
I don't know if you want to, I didn't, I'm not sure I heard the exchange in full, but,
Dan, can you?
Yeah. Tomorrow night, one of the things we'll probably have to do, given the timing of the scheduling of the district commission on the farm store, the Sunnymead project, we're gonna take a position on that vis-a-vis the existing town plan, because that's all we have.
Right.
So just gonna give you a heads up that we'll be considering that tomorrow night.
Right. Yeah, and Dan, as you, we're all very aware that Sunnymead did the filing some months ago now, so the plan that was in effect is the current, the March, well, what it,
Yeah.
I don't know the date of that plan.
Yeah.
On that part.
Yeah, it's only if their application, their current application gets rejected on the basis of the town plan as the 2017 town plan, then that raises the next question of whether, it's hard for us to gauge the support or the opposition to this project, so whether any amendments to the town plan that would be in a future town plan, would accommodate that, that's, I guess we'll have to just play that by ear.
Mhm. Okay.
Where is that project right now, do you know?
Where's,
So it's being reviewed right now with Act 250? or what?
there's a hearing scheduled at the,
On the 19th.
yeah,
Is that the Act 250 hearing?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we could ask, we, the planning commission, could add, or you, I mean, you're parties to the, if you want to be parties to the thing too, could ask that they get a continuance just to push it off so we have a little more time to weigh this. But we're certainly not going to get anything done on an amended town plan before before they're going to want to rule on this application.
Yeah.
Is there a chance to have a continuance? Because we haven't come up with an opinion as a board.
Well, we haven't, but if I understand town history, the select board has not. It's been the planning commission that has come.
Well, it depends how far back you want to go with town history.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's been times when the planning commission and the select board have been at odds on certain projects and
So you say that discontinuous until the new town plan is put into place?
Yeah, well, what are we gonna tell them about that? You know, if
Yeah.
we're waiting for a survey to do the next town plan, you know.
You gotta go through public hearings again and all that good stuff, so I
Yeah.
think that would be.
Yeah, I think they would probably grant a short continuance just to give the planning commission and the select board, if it wants to take a position vis-a-vis the application conforming to the existing town plan.
I think that's wise, because I think the Act 250 Commission wants to know what we as a town, as a select board, and obviously the planning commission, how you feel.
Yeah.
That's important information for them, and you are going to give that, your opinion, right?
We're gonna give the planning commission's opinion. If
Right,
the select
right.
board, of course, if the select board and the planning commission agree on that opinion, it has, it's that much stronger if
Right.
they get, another party to, if our, depending on what our opinion is, there'll be either proponents or opponents to the project who have individual standing in these hearings, which, that would give them some support or something else to overcome, depending on their position on the project.
I mean, maybe none of you agree with me on this, but I think we should talk about it and come up with an opinion.
To do that, we'd have to have a meeting. next
I know,
Monday.
that's what I'm saying, we
Yeah.
need to have ask them for a continuance.
Yeah, well, you could ask them for a continuance, without deciding what you want to do.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, that's probably a pretty strong reason to get the continuance, that it happened, quickly enough that you haven't even had time to consider that. But that's basically what we're gonna do, but if you wanna, we could let you know what we decide tomorrow, and then, you could decide if you wanna take that same position or a different position at the district.
So you don't have an opinion right now that you're.
I have a personal opinion.
Right, but
I
as
don't have
a
one, but
commission.
I can't represent to you that that's the planning commission's position.
Does the planning commission have an opinion?
That's the agenda item.
That's the agenda item, yeah,
Okay.
I can't come here tonight and say
No,
this is
no.
what the planning commission
No,
wants
so-
to do, because we haven't
So
considered.
tomorrow night, you're gonna come up with an opinion,
Right,
and then that you'll say to the commission.
right. And we'll let you know as soon as we do, and then, and so and we'll give you a timeline, but we're gonna have to communicate pretty quickly with the district, so. The Act 250 board,
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
so.
Thanks.
I apologize for looking at my phone and messages. I had totally forgot, but I've been tracking my granddaughter and I forgot to look. Everything's okay, so I'm still here. Okay, going on to the delinquent tax sale. Dave?
Yeah, so 32 V.S.A. 5259 allows the town to bid on a property if the bid price is not enough to cover the delinquent taxes, penalties, interest, and legal fees, or if there is no bid at all. So going into the tax sale, which is Thursday morning, 11 o'clock here, there's one house, or I'm sorry, one property for sale. In order to do that, the board needs to appoint a person to be present at the meeting, to make a bid if bid needs to occur. We have done this since I've been here. We did end up with one property at one point. It was distressed property. Otherwise it just continues on and is delinquent, and the leverage to get a delinquency kind of dissolves if it just goes without a sale. So I recommend that the town does bid if the property is, if the bid price is not enough, or there is no bid whatsoever, and that the board appoints somebody based upon 32 V.S.A. 5259.
For the past two sales, I've been the town representative, and I actually did buy a property, thank goodness for the town. 2 years ago, I think we acquired the property. So I'm willing to do it again if my colleagues would like that.
Wow, I will definitely make that motion.
Might be some others that have.
Anyone else want to talk about this
I'm in a
opportunity?
class all day. So.
I'm working. Jim?
Did you want a second? Ask me for.
Clyde, do you want to have that opportunity? Okay, that's a no.
I think that's enough.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that we appoint Bill Hobby to represent the town at the delinquent tax sale according to,
32 V.S.A. 5259.
is that all you need?
Yep.
Okay,
I'll second that motion.
okay.
Just a quick question, what's the amount due to the town?
About 3,500.
What's that, 3,500?
Yeah, I don't know what the lawyer fee is.
Yeah, it's upwards towards high 4s to 5, I think, at the end of the day.
I don't do this with glee in my voice, and it's
No.
not a good situation by any means.
How long has this been going on? Have they been delinquent? Is it just 1 year?
No, it's a couple.
Couple of years?
And this is the only property?
This is the only property we have left.
And 2-3 months ago, we had how many?
At least 12.
Fantastic.
And for those in the audience, this is actually good news, because for a while, the town did not pursue collection of these properties. And over the past couple of years, the number of properties that have been delinquent have been shrinking, which is good for all of us as taxpayers. So there's a motion on the floor, and
Did Clyde second it?
Yeah.
Okay.
okay, all in favor say aye.
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 It's passed.
Jim just wanted a second. I thought Jim seconded it, but I must have been.
No, I think.
Did quite.
A dual second by Jim and Clyde.
I'm not doing it.
Okay, going on to new business, we have the Community Recognition Award.
I'm just gonna cycle back for a minute, did we have orders that we had to approve at the beginning?
We did.
We did?
Yeah,
So, amnesia.
Well,
I've got a good memory, but it's short.
I put you down as voting for the accounts payable.
I'm back.
okay. Jim has presented to the board a concept for having a Community Recognition Award. I'll let him chat about it a little bit. I've done a little bit of homework and talking with another person in town who's recently moved from another area that pursued this, so I'll have some thoughts after Jim speaks.
Yeah, well, so my observation was we have a couple of businesses in town that have been here for a long time, served the community for a long time. And it'd be nice for the select board just to recognize those businesses, you know, with a plaque that says, you know, thank you for your 4 decades of service to the community of Hartland. You know, kind of call it the Community Champion Award. The cost, you know, the rough cost of these plaques is, you know, when you talk about the wood, the engraving material, the actual engraving, it's somewhere between, you know, 100 and 175 per plaque, depending on how many characters you engrave. So there's a place up in Lebanon that does this work that seems to be fairly reputable. So the, you know, total expenditure would be $350 or less, probably less, for 2 plaques. So 350, you know, 100, whatever, 175 each, max.
Okay, some of the things that are on my mind, and I've spoken to Jim a little bit about this, is I feel if the board is going to do this, that we have to create a format to go forward with this. You know, the question is this a one-time shot, or is this really going to be something that we do on a periodic or an annual basis? Is this an award for businesses as well as town citizens? The Conservation Commission has a conservation award that they give out to, I'm not sure how, is that an annual award?
It's annual, yeah.
An annual award. You know, just given this age of transparency, I would wonder how we could involve the public so that there's input from them as to who should or shouldn't have the award. And then just again, just that going forward sort of aspect, how often do we do it? The 2 businesses that Jim's identified, there's no question that they've been in town for a long time. And I think all of us probably use their services. But again, I just want to, I feel we should put some framework around this so that we know how to do it again and how to do it correctly and how to do it without creating controversy that it's not an open process.
Right, I'll be happy to put that framework together, but, you know, I'd like to move forward with this so that we're not kind of delaying it.
Yep, yep. Good, and I'll work with you on
Yeah,
creating framework.
Right, we can all, yeah, all have input into that.
Mary?
So you're assuming then that we are all on board with this idea?
No, we'd have to have a vote.
I'm not on board with it.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, I hate plaques. I think they're a waste of resources. People put plaques on the wall. They look at it once, twice. It's a waste of resources. It's a waste of money. When that person dies, those go in the bin, okay? So I would say,
Martin, see if we can get that plaque from Mary returned.
Sorry, Mary.
that's fine.
So
I hate
Rules
plaques.
out Mary from being a conservation.
That's why we got one,
Yes,
one class.
yes, yes.
We had the same
You
conversation,
did.
like, you don't want to give like one thing, it's like, we'll do one recognition with lots of names.
And I hate trophies for the same reason. You know, people outgrow them, they don't know what to do with them, blah, blah, they end up in landfill. So I think what we've done in the past, maybe for decades, is recognize people in the town report. Okay, so right in either the select board's letter, whatever, annual letter, or the town manager's, that's where you do it. It is dicey going forward because how about all the people who don't get recognized, who are heroes every single day? Let's say people who take care of their elderly parents, you know, every day.
Yeah.
So, and this takes nothing from these community champions, as you mentioned. They are community champions. How do we recognize them is what I'm questioning. And I really hate plaques. I just really hate them. So,
Balloons.
no, I hate those too because they're filled with helium and there is a diminishing quantity of that in the world, and that helium can be used for much better reasons than party balloons. So anyway, that's where I stand. I may be the only one, but I felt I need to say that. I like the gesture and the thought. Yes, they deserve recognition. How should they be recognized is what I question.
Yeah, and I've also wrestled with who should do the recognition. Should it be a group of citizens, that volunteers that come up with it on an annual basis, or should it actually be the select board? If it is the select board, then the things I've already mentioned, I think we have to work out.
Yeah. I mean, we could accept import from people saying, you know, this person or so, these people are, you know, deserving of it. And then we'd have to make the decision. But as far as plaques go, I've got 3 or 4 that I was given back when I was a clerk that I'll bring down and give you, so that.
I'll be tossing them out. Or maybe they could be reused. I don't know.
They're in a drawer. What?
Yeah, right.
In the loft in the barn, I can come up with a few too.
Yeah.
So, okay, Ms. Potter, you're on.
I originally thought that was a lovely idea, but you bring up a valid point. My son plays hockey. We have all kinds of trophies that are,
Yeah.
what do you do with them?
Right.
It is just,
That's why
it's
you have a
great for
2-car
now,
garage.
but not going in there.
They're gonna stay at your house when they move out. When they go on to
Yeah.
their adult lives, you're gonna be stuck with them, because that's what happened to my parents.
Yeah,
Like dozens of these stupid trophies. Not one of them was won by me,
yeah.
just saying.
At least Guy gave us a piece of his own wood from Hartland.
Your name is not going on.
I know, I just shot myself in the foot, but that's okay.
Can we do a page where, you know, in the town report?
Yeah.
That, you know, it's a recognition and with
Oh, I
input.
see.
And
Yeah. I mean, it
do a
could,
picture and it's, you know,
It
like
could
a
become-
dedication, but it's a recognition page.
it could become a popularity contest.
So then
That's the only
it's-
other
yeah.
thing, you know, then people, well, how about, you know,
Yeah,
I don't know. It's just food for thought.
yeah.
But
I do like the idea. But I
Please
do
don't.
agree with Mary too.
please don't think about a plaque.
Okay, we're all over the place here.
Yep. It's your job to rein us in. Go ahead, Phil.
How about we use hand sanitizer? Do we entertain a motion? Where are we at? Or could we offer, I think Jim said something that's important, we don't really know businesses that are being identified. We all know, should Jim and I do the work, some legwork to put some structure to this, and come back saying, here's how we'll go forward? How do we get out of this conundrum here, using the word that was used earlier tonight?
I mean, for now, I guess I just withdraw the table topic.
Okay,
Are you gonna sulk? You gonna be sullen?
I'm not going to talk to you for a long time. Which
I
might
don't
work in your favor.
I don't think that the idea should go away.
Yeah, I don't either.
Like, I will, even though I agree with the plaque, I don't think the idea should go away. I think it's a great idea,
I'm
the
fine.
concept, yeah.
We got other business to attend to tonight.
So how should I write this up then?
discussion and table to future
Okay.
meeting.
We're just now beyond Labor Day, so we do start working on the town report.
So it'd be like a good time to,
I'll just throw that out there.
and a lot of people would see the town report.
We hope.
I read it cover to cover, truly.
You're
And
the
then I
only
keep
one.
Ever since my kid's name made it into the town report.
It's just
It's a big
people
deal.
like throw them out at the post office. Okay, sorry.
Okay, let's move forward if we're ready to the manager's update. Dave?
So I think we pretty well slayed ARPA pretty well. I can skip right over that. Highway, Jennyville Road was essentially completed. It did get reviewed by the state of Vermont. There's a couple things that we need to do on that before they're gonna green light that project for grant to be paid out. The ditch needs to be expanded in 2 places that we didn't put ditching in for technical reasons. So we're gonna go back and we need to just revisit that. It's not gonna be anything like the week that we did in August, but there will be some additional work there. And there needs to be some stone on the outlets to the culverts, which is truly an oversight by us. So we'll be going back to that possibly later this week or into next week. But we did put off we were scheduled this week for Gilson Road. We did end up putting that off for a few days, so it looks like we're gonna try and mesh these 2 projects.
Okay. Dave, can I ask you to clarify, I understand the sequence, the contractor finished the work, there was a state representative that reviewed the work, but before funds would be dispersed to the town, there were some follow-up items. And are those follow-up items being done by the contractor or by ourselves?
They'll be done by ourselves.
Okay.
It wasn't, the 2 places that we need to do the ditching work wasn't a contractor issue. So we'll instead of calling them back and trying to re-gig that, we can do that ourselves and kind of move on.
Okay.
Tax sale we went over. I'll just say that we're now below the $49,000 mark, which is again really good for us. So we're heading in the right direction as far as delinquencies go. Rec Center, Rec Department is underway. The after-school program is open and running, so that's a good sign. The challenge there will be to keep everybody intact and get through to, if not the entire year, to the holidays and kind of go from there, but we're hoping on the entire year. Buildings and grounds, this came up as kind of a discussion in the summertime. I said we generally wait until the end of August towards Labor Day. The last several years, COVID kind of reared its ugly head again. It's still out there. Actually, Cheyenne tonight is out because of COVID, but we're looking at reopening Damon Hall and the Rec Center to the public for public use, and the library is going to follow suit as well. We talked about Sunnymead. The Sunnymead project is Monday morning, September 19th. The hearing is here in Damon Hall. There is a site visit on location at 9:30 prior. It hasn't been decided whether that hearing will be here or upstairs. It may very well be upstairs just based upon perceived perhaps turnout and the use of some of the screen and some other things.
Who would set up for that meeting? Who would set up the hall for that meeting?
We'll put out chairs. Rob will do that work, but they come in and they've got their own computers and stuff like that, so we make the space available. They've asked for use of the screen here or perhaps the screen upstairs, and they bring pretty much everything else. Taxes, if you haven't paid them already, they are due by Friday, or you make the list.
Okay.
You get interest.
Okay.
So Friday it is due. That's all I got.
Okay. Any questions for Dave on that?
The other question I have is, I didn't see it until it was done, because I couldn't go up Jennyville Road, is when you cut off half the roots of a maple tree, how long is it going to live on that bank?
So it's always a challenge. Last year, you know, some people perceive that we cut too many. This year is perceived that we didn't cut enough. So it's always a challenge. It's difficult going into the ditching, you know, exactly how wide it's gonna end up being. So in doing that project, there was a couple trees that we thought we could work around. And I think there's one or two that, you know, we excavated into more than we would have cared for.
Yeah.
You know, we discussed that with the state review, and you know, the feedback is it's just, you know, it's just really tough to you know, to gauge.
Dave, do we have any correspondence at all that needs to be addressed?
We don't.
Okay. We do have an executive session before we adjourn and then re-adjourn. We do have the Class 4 and legal trail policy discussion. The Conservation Commission has been working on that, and we'll be presenting that. I hope at the next meeting we can have the discussion about the Declaration of Inclusion and put a motion to have Hartland be one of the Vermont towns. There are already 40 or 50 that have passed that. So I'll do some homework and have some drafts for you to review on that. If anyone wants some additional information, there is a website for Declaration of Inclusion in Vermont that has that information. So let's adjourn the regular meeting.
Make a motion first.
I'll make a motion, okay, and then I'd like to take a break before we.
So at 7:26, who's making the motion?
So we're not adjourned, correct?
We have to make a motion to enter.
Gotta make the motion, but you can't make the motion if you're out of session, so you gotta stay in session to make the motion.
And then we adjourn.
Then you have
And
to
then
come back.
then you just go into executive session. So then, when you come out of the executive session,
Then we adjourn.
then you adjourn.
I'm gonna make a motion to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back to the motion.
Why don't we just go into executive session? And
Wanna take a break?
Yeah.
I make a motion that we move to executive session per V.S.A. 1-313-A3.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We're done. Yeah.